And the first relationship killer that you see in this text that still affects us today is this fear of exposure. Every single one of us that have ever been in a relationship with another person, which means everyone, every single one of us has a fear of exposure. And that fear of exposure makes us distant. There's things about us in our lives that we don't like. We look in the mirror and we look at ourselves, and maybe there's things about our appearance. Maybe it's not our appearance, maybe it's our personality, maybe it's certain things that, just the way that we are, we don't like it. And because we don't accept it about ourselves, we certainly don't think that other people are going to accept it about us, and so we fear being exposed. And we hide, and we try to do things that conceal the things that we're ashamed of. And so if you look in the text, look at verse 7, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. It says that they were aware of their nakedness. The NIV says they were ashamed of their nakedness, and they tried to cover themselves. So they were exposed, and that exposure created fear. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, why can't I get close to people? I really love my spouse, I really love my children, and yet I have trouble getting close. I have trouble with intimacy. I want intimacy in my life with these people and these relationships, but I struggle. What is that? That is the fear of exposure. And the fear of exposure makes us distant. It causes us to push back. And notice what it says in verses 9 and 10. In Genesis chapter 3, you see the distancing between the Lord and Adam and Eve. The Lord called to the man and he said to him, "Where are you at?" And Adam said, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself." Those two things always go together. Fear of nakedness, fear of exposure, and distance. The fear of exposure makes me distant. We are fearful of nakedness. Any of you ever had a dream where you were naked? And that's just me. Mine was I was in the cafeteria at school, and the cafeteria ladies were doling out the beans and rice, and I was naked, and it's like they didn't really notice, but I noticed, and nobody else noticed, and then I'm the only guy that had naked dreams. But we don't like that, right? We have a fear of it. And you can live with somebody 50, 60, 70 years. You can be married to somebody, love them deeply, and still keep secrets from them because you're afraid that if I'm totally honest, if I let it all go, then they're going to figure out the things about me that I don't like about me, and they're not going to accept me for who I really am. And so we conceal it. We hide because we're afraid of the exposure, and it makes us distant. And it has 3 different phases. This is usually how it goes. And tell me if I'm wrong, but it starts with shame. There's a little bit of guilt over what you did, and then all of a sudden you become ashamed of who you are, what you've become, and that shame causes us to be afraid of being humiliated. That shame makes us afraid of being embarrassed. We're just mortified. If anybody ever embarrasses you or humiliates you, you'll never forgive them because that's the worst thing that could happen, to be exposed. Why is that? Because you're feeling shame. And then from that shame, it usually shifts into the cover-up. And the cover-up for Adam and Eve were fig leaves and loincloths. But we're much more sophisticated than that. Hopefully fig leaves never come back into style. But what we do is we use humor. You may be the class clown. You may be always making a joke, never serious, but inside you're feeling shame. Inside you're not happy with who you really are. Or you may be the I've got it all together person. I've got the right clothes. I've got the right car, the right house. I say the right things. I do the right things. I'm Mr. or Mrs. Got it all together, and you just present yourself that way. Social media is terrible at this. Social media, we present our best selves, right? We don't. If I were to look at your social media page, I would think, wow, you've got so many friends, and everybody wants to date you, and every picture you take, you're so pretty. Why? Because we present ourselves with our best selves on social media, except for the few that use social media to vent, and they only talk about bad things, but that's usually the minority. The majority of us, we hide, we conceal, we hide the things about ourselves that we don't want anyone else to know. Shame, the cover-up, and then the distance. Verse 8, the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Our fear of exposure causes a relational breakdown. Our fear of exposure causes us, even to the people that we love, even to maybe even your spouse, to say, I love you, I want to be close to you, you can know everything about me except this. And that, whether you like it or not, no matter how bad it is, no matter how justified you may be, that creates distance. It kills intimacy. It kills the relationship. The fear of exposure makes me distant. And it's not just in our personal relationships. It's in our relationship with the Lord. Every single one of us, we use our freedom in the same way that Adam and Eve used their freedom. We use our freedom to, instead of love God and do as God says, we use it to hate God, to rebel against God, and to do things our own way. And then that creates guilt in our life. Every single one of us has guilt. Every single one of us know that we've done wrong. Every single one of us carries this sense of shame. We know that we're separated from God, and so we push back. And for some people, you hate God. For others of you, you just don't want to talk about it. Let's talk about anything but. What is that? It's a fear of exposure, and it makes you distant. Every single one of us have it, myself included, and it kills our relationships.